So in station 4 we're looking at bones of the bony thorax. So when we look at the bony thorax, we've got several different sections. Firstly, we've got the sternum, and we've got all these ribs coming in. Now the sternum is divided into 3 sections, and you can see the really faint line just shows you the distinguishing where one section moves into the other. So the first section, or the superior section of the sternum, is called the Manubrium. The middle section of the sternum is called the body, and the very bottom of the sternum is called the xiphoid process. And we've got rib articulation sites all the way along this sternum. The ribs have got very specific names as well. The first 7 sets of ribs, so ribs 1 through 7, are called the true ribs. And ribs 8 through 12 are called the false ribs. Finally, we've got just 11 and 12, which forms a subcategory of the false ribs called the floating ribs. So you see these ribs down here and down here. Now this true, false and floating is more of a nickname. They've all got correct anatomical names. And you'll notice that all the ribs, if you look the whole way down, all the ribs, and I'll show you the posterior view, all the ribs attach to the vertebrae of the thoracic region. So 12 sets of ribs in total, corresponding with the 12 thoracic vertebrae. So they all originate from a part of thoracic vertebrae. Now the true ribs, the correct anatomical name for the true ribs is called the vertebro-sternal ribs. Now they receive this name because they go from the vertebrae to the sternum. So the 2 words, vertebro-sternal, come from the origin and insertion of the rib, vertebrae to sternum. But they all enter the sternum. So more specifically, they've got direct sternal attachment. So it's one bit of cartilage attaching the rib cartilage directly into the sternum. Rib cartilage directly into the sternum. Notice how false ribs down here, they're a little bit different. They all attach to each other in a cartilage. So this whole pile of costal cartilage or rib cartilage, when it forms together, it's called the costal margin. So the correct anatomical name for our false ribs are called the vertebrochondral ribs. And that prefix chondral refers to the word cartilage. So vertebrae, because they're originating from the vertebrae, they're wrapping around and going into this whole pile of costal cartilage before they enter the sternum. So vertebral chondral coming from the word vertebrae to cartilage. And finally our floating ribs, lying right down here in the abdominal walls. They go from the vertebrae, so here's the ribs 11, here's ribs 12. They go from the vertebrae to nowhere. They just sit in the muscle of the abdomen. So their correct anatomical name is simply the vertebral ribs, because they have no anterior attachment.